Hello everyone, welcome to Cinema Savvy and welcome to the first official video in our Christopher Nolan month. So as you may have seen from our previous video that you can see, the Christopher Nolan month announcement, the entire month of August, we are going to be covering Christopher Nolan content. We're going to be reviewing all of his movies. There'll be some extra videos in there for you guys. And we are kicking off with his first official feature. It's only 70 minutes long, so it's a very short feature, but it's a feature nonetheless. And it's probably the one that the least amount of people have seen, including us. So you actually do own this movie. And this was the last Christopher Nolan movie I had to watch, which is kind of ironic because it's technically his first one. So I did like a big full circle coming back to this movie, really.
Yeah, this is the penultimate one. As of recording, I'm yet to see Insomnia, which I shall be doing very shortly. But for those that haven't heard of this, this is the following. This is a DVD, and you sit there thinking, you know, George always preaches Blu-rays and 4Ks. I'm not that much of a preacher, but this is, I think, and I believe, the last ever DVD I bought. I bought this before Interstellar came out. If you guys are watching on video, the top of this sheet says, from the director of Memento and Insomnia. This was made pre-Batman Begins, and you can't buy these easily. This cost me £20 for a 1 hour, 10-minute film. I'm not complaining. I've spent worse money on a lot worse things. But for a DVD in the DVDs are kind of done era, that was weird. And this was probably the first DVD I've watched in as long. It sits nicely on the Nolan shelf, but I don't normally bring a film up like that. But I've never seen one of them in a shop ever, and I never will.
Same. And that's why, because you were debating beforehand whether you wanted to show it. It's like gold dust. So absolutely, you show that film off with pride. But before we get into that, we'll go into socials first. So as we said, we are covering Christopher Nolan stuff throughout the rest of the month. So if you are a Christopher Nolan fan, if you've just discovered this video, if you've been following us for a while, hit the subscribe button, follow us on all the socials. They are in the description down below. We also have merch available with a very nice Christopher Nolan logo down there on TeePublic. The link to that is also in the description. So yeah, before we get into the following, which is going to be our main feature on this review, we wanted to sort of go back and take this opportunity while we can, because we are talking everything. So we wanted to go back and talk about one of his first short films that he made. Now, if I can bring up a list here, I feel so prepared for this. He actually did do a couple of short films before this point. However, this is the only one that I think has been made available for people to watch. In fact, I think it's a bonus feature on the DVD that you were holding just there a second ago. So yeah, the unreleased short films that he made was Tarantula in 1989. There was one called Larceny in 96. He was a camera operator on a film called Fearville in 97. But we are going to be talking very briefly about his 97 film Doodlebug, which I believe he had the script written for when he was at university, sorry, for international viewers. And it's 3 minutes, and you can watch it on YouTube. And George, you just watched this movie for the first time. I can't really call it a movie, can I? This very short film, literally before we hit live.
It was weird because I know this sounds horrid to say, I'm not the biggest watcher of short films. I know that that's obviously how most people get their careers started. It's very common. There's some really good websites. Obviously, everyone's done them at university. We did the same course at the same uni, different years, but we know exactly what it's like when you see student films, and very often we're going to put our unique personal take onto something a bit different, a bit arty. That's my way of putting it. And Doodlebug, it's hard to analyze a short film, but it feels like many of the short films I've seen. It's one man who we will discuss a lot more in the following, but who also produced the following. But this is kind of experimental because this is 1990. Was it 7? Doodlebug was released. Sorry,
97. Yeah,
97. So they're using. Obviously, it was done back then, but we have green screens. If we wanted to put a giant face of me behind me, we could. We could do it to Chris. We could do smaller versions of me. But in 1997, that tech isn't fully available yet. And you can do it. You can splice footage. Of course, you can. I think George Lucas called it 3D editing on the Phantom Menace documentary, and the editors sat there like, this is wrong. And actually now it's so common. And basically there's a very small bug, which is plot twist. And that's right, guys, a Nolan plot twist within 3 minutes of the film. And the bug is the man chasing it around. Like when you try and hit spiders with sandals, not that we do, but that kind of vibe. Plot twist, it's a smaller version of him, and then you think it's all over, and then there's a giant face appears. Picture the Hans Zimmer Boam, but it's just the face of the actor, and then the shoe coming down to squash him. Plot twist ending. That's the gist of it. It's hard to analyze, but I thought there's seeds of things that are coming. Politely put, as easy as I can put that. It's very strange talking about a short film. I'm sorry I'm waffling, Chris.
No, it's cool. We'll be getting onto the following in a moment, but I think there are still things that you can look at in this, although it's very slight. I mean, don't get me wrong. You watch this, not one moment do you watch this short film and go, "That's the guy that's going to direct The Dark Knight one day." It's as far removed from that as possible. However, there are a few little things in there that you can look at that you can see this, as you mentioned, like the seeds of what would come, even in his next couple of films, really, in terms of the feel, in terms of some of the themes and everything like that. So this movie was apparently shot. The Doodlebug was shot over a weekend, 2 days, and it was shot on 16mm film, which indeed his next film, The Following, was as well. And it's shot in black and white. So visually and the feel of this film, it's got this very eerie, uncomfortable, rundown apartment, disheveled kind of protagonist character played by Jeremy Theobald in the movie. And that's a very similar theme, I would say, to certainly The Following, who is the main character, is obviously, again, played by Jeremy Theobald, who was his friend at uni. And even in Memento, you've got that whole like apartment, rundown, shady kind of character. So a lot of themes there. In terms of the actual thing, though, it's almost like a who was the guy, blanking on his name, who did Eraserhead? David Lynch. It feels like David Lynch, or like Tim Burton, or even Sam Raimi. There are elements where I'm watching this and I can kind of see some like Evil Dead things in there, with the things scurrying over the floor, the little characters. And really, the last thing I need to mention. So this was apparently taken in an interview from Christopher Nolan himself, who said that he's talking about the idea of multiple dimensions in the plot, and he said that films are uniquely suited towards addressing paradox, recursiveness, and worlds within worlds. So you've got that, again, sort of like Inception things, like illusions and worlds within worlds, as he mentioned, which we will see throughout many of his films, really. So that's kind of our little review on Doodlebug. We wanted to open with that because obviously it is a film out there that you can go and see. So if you haven't seen it, go and check it out. It's very weird, but it's kind of a nice little prologue into our review now. We're going to be headed into his main film now, which is going to be the subject of this video, The Following. So this was released in 1998. I believe it was released a year later in the UK, but I think it hit film festivals the year previous. And so had you seen this film before? You have the DVD. Had you watched it when you got it, or did you watch it fairly recently, gearing up for this review?
So yesterday was my first time watching this, pre-recording. So this was watched on Wednesday, 3 days ago, if you're at home. And it's one of them films where, we always say it, you say it to your friends and they take it the wrong way, like you're laughing, but it's on the list. Everyone, even people that don't like films, have a list of films they have to watch. And it's been there forever. And the problem with Nolan films, it's not actually a problem. The start of the year came, it was February. I was like, I really want to watch a Christopher Nolan film. I'm so in the mood right now. And I was like, I can't. I promised myself I wouldn't watch them until Tenet comes out. Exact same thing happened with Star Wars before Episode 7. I ended up doing all 6 in a day. Was never going to do that for Nolan. Just too much. That was too much even then. But a big thing with this was I bought this before Interstellar. I never watched it in. Not that you have to be in the mood, but if I'm going to do a Nolan marathon, it can only be in the build-up to a film coming out. Mm-hmm. And since Interstellar, we've only had Dunkirk, and I didn't see it in the lead-up to Dunkirk, and not that I haven't had reason to watch it. I have had many reasons. I've just not watched it, but I sat down to watch it yesterday. I get quite nervous with black and white films, and that's a bit of prejudice. I'm not a big fan of watching them at night. Not that it makes me tired more, but you've got to really be in the mood, and this felt so natural going into it very quickly. It had the right pacing. It wasn't black and white because it felt like it wanted to be black and white. It wasn't a gimmick that came with the film. It felt right. And I know in this current era we're talking about, I know we're on an element, but Parasite's got a black and white cut. I don't know if Logan got a black and white cut.
The Lighthouse,
Lighthouse,
shot in black
pure
and white.
Black and white. Mad Max Fury Road got a black and white cut. And are entering not a bit of a resurgence, because obviously this is 23 years ago. 22 years ago, sorry. Which is crazy. I was 2. But the thing about black and white films that Spielberg has said as well, they're timeless. He shot Schindler's List in black and white because it doesn't. When you've got curtains from the 90s in color, you can see they're old. In 2020, curtains from the 90s in black and white, they're just like normal curtains, and actually ages the film very well. And that's what kind of struck me on the instinct. The first few moments of this film, I was like, okay, you know, I'm down with this. It worked. It's a big thing. Obviously, it's not a copy of the film. It didn't fill the screen. I've got no issue with that at all. But off an instinct, I think that's a really big dynamic, is that it's black and white before we get into it. And for a first thing, I enjoyed it. I sat down last night at my dinner. I went straight through it. It's an hour and 10 minutes. It's not that much of a commitment. But I had a pretty good experience. And you watched it just before I did. So I was able to message you a couple of times.
It moves at a great pace. As we mentioned, 70 minutes, and it flies by. It really, really does. The story, for what it is, like, yes, there are, you know, some things that could be refined in there, but certainly for a first feature, I think it's incredible. You can definitely see, as we mentioned with Doodlebug, how he then evolved onto this. You can definitely see parts of this movie, which we'll talk about, some little Easter eggs in there. There are some names here and there. There's some little images you can see in the frame that would link to some of future films, which was, in hindsight, was really fun to go back and pick those out. And it's kind of nice as well that we're watching these, because we are watching these in the order that we're reviewing them as well. So it's like if you're looking at a band and you go back through their discography and you work in order, you can see how the band progresses. It's exactly the same with a director, and you can see how one film leads on to the next, essentially. I guess I should mention the plot, because this probably isn't a film that anyone knows about. So if anyone is curious about it, this is reading off Wikipedia. It tells the story of a young man who follows strangers around the streets of London and is drawn into a criminal underworld when he fails to keep his distance. I love the feel of this movie, and I think certainly the black and white, I think, helped in terms of some of the budget limitations. Certainly with the lighting, you can mask a lot out if it's in black and white. I think a lot of it was shot with natural lighting, or the lighting that was available on set. And there are some moments of the film where you can't really, I think the lighting isn't very effective. Certainly some of the shots in the bar, when the main characters enter in the bar towards the end of the film, the screen's basically all in darkness and you can't see anything. And that's due to the limitations of the lighting. But this was, I mean, I've got to give Christopher Nolan and co complete props for this one, because this was shot over a period of a year, and they were all working day jobs Monday to Friday, and they were basically just shooting stuff on Saturdays, like whenever they could, like in their free time. And, you know, I think where most of the budget came from was actually buying the 16mm film to shoot on. Scenes were rehearsed so that they could get it down in 1 or 2 takes to keep the costage down. And Nolan was just like ferrying his own money into buying the film reels, the 16mm film, to shoot his film, which is incredible. So the passion was there. You can absolutely see it. And for what it is, a 70-minute neo-noir movie, I think it does everything it needs to. It's got intrigue. The big thing, non-linear storytelling, which is a huge thing that would go on for like most of Nolan's catalogue of films, actually. So there's a lot in there. There's a lot in there that we can dissect, which we'll go into in a minute. But in terms of initial impressions, it was really kind of nice to, as the last Nolan movie I need to watch, obviously before Tenet, but it was nice to kind of end on his first movie, if that makes any sense.
No, absolutely. I want to jump in with the film reel, because not that obviously in 1998 we don't have digital cameras. I think The Phantom Menace was the first ever film to use digital, and it was a couple of minutes, if that. And you think back then, you know, people had to buy film, process it. It wasn't cheap. It was expensive. This wasn't a major studio production. This wasn't even an independent studio production. This was mainly Christopher Nolan's own money being put into the production of this. Again, as you mentioned, done over a year. The fact that he chose over a year, you know, you get a lot of projects, people might do something similar. They might drop out, okay, we can't do this. But the commitment from himself, the cast, the others, I thought was quite special, and I really liked it for that. And it feels like the plants are there of what comes. You mentioned some of the Easter eggs, which we'll get into soon. But certainly this is a film that it doesn't come across as, oh, this was my first film and it's been ignored forever, because, okay, they don't include it in the box sets. But the reason why is because Warner Brothers only include Warner Brothers films in said box sets. The first 3 don't get too much attention, but this film very much inspires what's to come. And it has been, I believe, referenced enough to a point that if you want to go out and see it, you can. We know it's hard to find, but he hasn't distanced himself away from it. For those that are into is it the Criterion Collection, which is the sort of be all and end all? This had a Criterion release in America where it could only come out in America, it couldn't get shipped, and they have to be authorized by the directors to even become Criterion. So it's a film that he's very aware of. You get some filmmakers that distance themselves from their first films, but in this case, I don't think so. I think the seeds are there. I think what was done, and even in 1999, just before we get into the story, I believe the budget of this was about £20,000, and it made about 800,000, which is, for an independent film, what's that, like 40 times its budget? That's still very successful for an opening film. And also in the 90s, black and white films it wasn't only black and white, color had been around for ages, and that was still selling a black and white film to people in the 90s. So full credit there. But if we're going to speak about the story, you kind of dabbled on the main plot. It's about a man that follows people around. He meets an interesting character called Cobb, Easter egg number 1. We're going to go into the characters, but that's the main thing. A man wearing a suit, whose characteristic, very... same year Titanic came out, sorry. If you don't know who Cobb is, it's the main character in Inception, but it's also played by a Rob Pattinson doppelganger in this film, who's also going to be in Tenet. I had to add that in there, but we've got 3 main characters. You've got, I believe he's called the young man.
Yeah.
Played by, I forgot the name.
Jeremy Theobald. Yeah.
And then we have Cobb, played by, apologies again, I should have brought the cast.
Do you want me to?
Can you please do the cast?
It's the very unfortunately named Alex Hoare, spelt differently, so it's fine. And I'm guessing the blonde is the third main character, played by Lucy Russell, who's actually been in The Crown, apparently. She played a character. I don't know how many episodes, but that's one of the recent credits.
And these 3 are essentially the main plot. You're following him around. We do have a cameo from, oh my god, this is really humiliating myself here. An actor that appeared in Batman Begins.
Are you talking John Nolan, his uncle?
Yes, he plays the policeman. He's appeared in many of his films. It's his uncle. That was a really neat. I think he's actually got the opening words in the film too. He's got a very, not British voice, but I think he's got quite a commanding voice. Where I can imagine him being like a theatre actor. Again, sign of things to come. He crops up in multiple films as they come down the line. So from Batman Begins, back in Dark Knight Rises to Dunkirk, we do see him down the line. We do have cameos of these cast in future films, but this one, I was hooked in the story, and I didn't think I would. I think that's the main thing, that the premise of someone following people was quite sinister. They make reference to that at the beginning, and essentially we find out, I don't know if I'm jumping too far ahead of the end, but the whole time he's actually being interviewed by the police. But we don't know this till the last few minutes, I guess we can say. That he's kind of talking about his life, that he follows people. He claims he's kind of not a stalker. He doesn't do bad things, but by doing this, he got into a league of the wrong people, and someone that he started following clocks on, and kind of turned him into a robber with him. And with the character of Cobb, he's quite enthusiastic. I think is probably the best way to say it. He's got great vocab. He's wearing the smart, sort of neat suits. He's the kind of guy that you'd probably want to go out for drinks with. I know he's not the best of characters when you head towards the end, but he's the kind of guy that if he asked you out just for like a couple of drinks, you'd be like, okay, I want to know this life story. I want to see where this is heading, because this is someone that can talk for England, and it's going to be fun to listen to. And he kind of picks the young man as this, he's unemployed. They make reference, he's a struggling writer. His apartment's littered with film references, which I know you've got one, which I'm going to let you talk about because you messaged me straight away. And he kind of picks a target to groom, to then use as an exploitation for his own principles. So he's ultimately the villain of the story. But if we want to jump ahead to the first Christopher Nolan plot twist, it's this, because as he makes himself an ally with the main character, it's the click of a finger when you realize that he set him up for the entire film. He's actually with the girl that the young man clearly fancies and in his relationship with.
I guess we should say spoilers on this, by the way.
Spoilers. Yeah, sorry.
We'll put that in the title or something. I guess,
of these Nolan reviews will be spoilers. They've all been out for long enough. I know this is ironically probably the one that less people have seen, actually. So apologies about that. But I really took it out there. If you want to talk about the apartment, sorry.
Yeah. So Easter egg number 2. I'm sure there's more in the film. I'm sure there's a lot more in the film. But when you're making a film, everything in that frame, I would imagine, from directors is put there on purpose. Whether it's certain little signifiers, things in the background, foreground, whatever it happens to be, they're put there for a reason. There's a scene where Cobb and the young man, the two main characters, are talking outside of the young man's apartment, and above his door is the bat symbol. Now, I think it's the Batman Returns one. I'm trying to think when this would have come out. So this would have been the Schumacher ones would have come out at this point, or at least the first one, I think. But it looks like the Batman Returns one. So clearly Nolan was already a Batman fan. Otherwise, he wouldn't have put it in there. And it's amazing. And then you think, wow, a few films down the line, give it a few years. And this guy's going to be handed the keys to the kingdom from Warner Brothers to produce the Batman trilogy, which is regarded as the best Batman media out there, essentially. So I don't know. The universe has got a funny way of working things, hasn't it? So when I saw that, I just thought that's awesome.
Yeah, and we'll be able to I think we'll bring this back up in the Batman Begins review, because there's quite a lot actually about how he got the Batman job, which we'll go into then. But that was very neat. You had a couple like Jack from The Shining on the wall, a couple of faces like, hey, I could pitch this. And I feel that I'm not going to say it's self-autobiographical. I'm not saying that because, it's the film director, it's his first film, but when the main character's this struggling writer and it's like, here's a director's first film, some people would tie that into being semi-autobiographical. I don't think it is, but I feel that somewhere in there's this sense of people have been through the motions with this. There's a great monologue by Cobb about they go and basically raid an apartment, and the guy tries to impress him by raiding his own apartment, and Cobb doesn't realize it's his, but he's kind of like, this is a pathetic person's house. We're better than this. We're not going to rob from someone that's clearly got no job, that's struggling, there's this and this. And it's quite dampening because he's trying to impress him, and then he's kind of just destroyed him without even realizing it's his own apartment. But then he's going along with it. So there's these little things there. I kind of do wonder if it was connected a bit more, because the film feels very personal. I think that's a better way of putting it. We mentioned the Doodlebug review. That is all taking place in one room. This film, there's obviously it's not got many sets, but the apartment, a lot of the shots in there are close-ups. You don't realize it's his own apartment until probably a couple of minutes into the scene, because they always focus on the typewriter, his writing corner, and they try and avoid showing that when they first enter the apartment room. And obviously then you get your other locations. You've got a second apartment, the coffee shops and rooftops, which all come in down the line later in his films. But
in terms of the number of locations in the film and everything, I think it's quite nice watching a film like this where, it was like, obviously like a labor of love made over a year. Obviously he's passionate about film. All of them involved are. And I think due to the limitations, you need to be aware of your limitations, condense it as much as you can, and make the best essentially with what you have. But I also think that although that's like a real life concern in terms of like financial and logistically the locations you can get to, it very much works in favor for the film and the feel of the film. It does have a very claustrophobic feel to it. It feels grimy. It feels lived in. Everything in the apartment. So the main locations really, you have the young man's apartment, you have the blonde's apartment, and you have the bar. I'd say, and obviously you've got like rooftops, but I'd say they're your three main locations, all very low lit, dingy kind of, close up apartments. Absolutely. And I think that really does fit into the tone of the movie. It does feel very uncomfortable. It does feel very seedy. And I like how Nolan was able to capture that. And watching this movie, we have hindsight now that, guys gone on to make the Batman trilogy, Interstellar, Inception, all films that we'll get to with these huge, massive budgets and everything like that, massive scale. Sky's the limit for Christopher Nolan now, essentially, at the moment. And although I'm not going to go into it too much, because this will be in our next review when we talk about Memento, I watched that earlier today, and I love that kind of low-budget feel to his earlier few movies. And I would love to see Christopher Nolan at some point go back to a film similar to this, in this kind of style, very, very bare bones. And it's just, like the quality of the direction, the vision, and everything about it, and the writing especially. I'd love to see him go back to a film like this. And yeah, it's the similarities you see in terms of the characters, the very sort of bedraggled, creepy undertones to a protagonist, which you get definitely in Doodlebug, you get in this, in Memento, and even in some respects as well with Insomnia. Now, I haven't rewatched Insomnia. It's been a long while since I've seen it, but Al Pacino's character is quite a haunted, unsettled kind of character in that. So definitely a recurring theme for the first few entries in his filmography, definitely.
And I think that's a good thing because, when we speak about him now, here's, $200 million Tenet, here's the big budget Batman films, whatever he wants to make, he can go and make. It wasn't always like that. It's never like that for directors. And as you mentioned, the early films, they feel sort of grimy, grungy. You've got I know they're shot on film, but you've got that kind of almost, it's not really a grain effect, but it feels like, to quote the horrible Star Wars phrases, like it feels lived in. And I know that's such a bizarre thing because it's filmed on location. And I guess that's another big thing, that the reason it doesn't feel like a studio space is because it's not for these. And granted, they're still on studio in some new films, but if he wants to go on location, he goes on location. He doesn't care what country, where of that country, what time of year, what's available. He will go all out for this. And I certainly felt like in this film, they have that. Same as you mentioned, Memento, and about halfway through into it as well. And you've got some of the buildings and the world they live in, the motels. We'll get into that on the next video. But I think for a debut film, this was solid. As I mentioned, I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. I wouldn't know what to expect. Sometimes you see a first film from a director and it can not put you off, but you say, okay, it's not the best. And what I will say with this, saying the characters, as we mentioned, the actor of the young guy, it's not the best performance. And again, but for a first film, it's solid. Considering the lead actor was a producer on the film as well, that kind of surprised me. That fair play for him for choosing to lead in this. Of course, he was in Doodlebug as well. So obviously there's a connection there. He got a cameo in Batman Begins, which is quite neat when you think about it. But the performances, I thought Cobb was excellent.
Yeah.
I thought he was my favorite part of the film. Every time he spoke, I kind of hung on to his words. He had that, enthusiasm to want to listen to him. And it's like the whole sort of character alignment stuff where, if it was you, I would go out with, I'm not a burglar, I'm not a thief, but I would go out with him to an apartment because he makes it look so much cooler and there's that charm to him. And that's all part of the plan to build up to the big plot twist that he's been playing he's been playing the young man from the very beginning. And that was his plan from the get-go. And he also does the ultimate Nolan. He sets you up, he sets the characters up, and you get plot twist number one, which is Cobb's villainous turn. And then I guess if we speak about the ending quickly, plot twist number two is that they kill the blonde and he set up the young man as the murderer when he had nothing to do with it. And more so, it reminded me of the end of... Oh God, it's just lost in my head. Sorry, there's a perfect film comparison to where you get like this sort of villainous speech of how the perfect plan came together. We literally get that, and it's so good because it's believable, and you did not expect it as the film went on.
Yeah, Cobb was easily my favorite character in this. Really, really fascinating character, and to a point where I really want to explore this character more in like a longer film. 70 minutes really doesn't do him justice. He is really incredibly fascinating character. As you mentioned, very charismatic, bit of a yuppie kind of feel to him, but, very, very strangely likable as well in a weird way. He's a fascinating character, complete kleptomaniac, and he does go on this kind of speech as well, his reasoning as to why he does what he does, which I think, especially when you get to the ending and like the whole setup and everything and the murder aspect, part of me thinks that was kind of like a weak conclusion to his character. I think he was a lot more interesting at the beginning, in that he has this weird kind of skewed reasoning for doing things. His motive for doing things is that he takes items away from people so that they appreciate what they have. So he has no qualms about ruining someone's relationship by planting pieces of evidence in their apartment, stealing photographs, valuables, whatever it happens to be, in order to just sort of like throw the cat amongst the pigeons, really, just because he can and he has that power, and he kind of has this weird, like almost like godlike quality to him, this narcissism that he's doing this kind of thing. And I think that's somewhat lost at the end when you find out that he's just, financial gain, and he's just set someone up for murder and things like that. I think it's lost a little bit. It still works as a twist and it's still fine. However, I think it lacked the intrigue of how he was written throughout the rest of the film. So that'd be one of my criticisms. And then, yeah, you're absolutely spot on with the other one. I didn't think Jeremy Theobald was bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I think there are some bits where maybe you needed an actor with more experience or more punch behind the delivery. There's a moment towards the end of the film where he's having a conversation with the blonde and he sort of finds out that he's been set up. And I thought it was a very flat delivery, and it lacked that power that I think you needed in scenes like that. So very few negatives like that. And the last, I guess, collaboration that we could mention, which is probably one of his first, Christopher Nolan's first long-term collaborations, is David Julian, who did the music. So David Julian provided the music for Doodlebug, this film, the following, Memento, Insomnia. Had a little bit of a break with Batman Begins with Hans Zimmer, and then got him back for Prestige, and that was the last movie that he used him for. So a lot of movies under his belt with this collaboration here, and then before switching to Hans Zimmer. And obviously now we have, and I'm blanking on the name. What's the new
Ludwig Göransson?
Thank you. Yes, so maybe he'll be the next. Maybe he'll be the next long-term collaborator. We don't know. But it's interesting to know, even from this movie, little things that will come to fruition and develop in subsequent Christopher Nolan films.
Absolutely, and like I said, it was a pleasure to watch. All honesty, I've not seen many new films over lockdown. I think that's a really fair way to watch it. We've done our watch-alongs. It's mainly been films that we love, we've seen before, but it was nice to watch, ironically, something new, albeit 22 years after release. So I was honestly shocked at how much I enjoyed this as well. I didn't just think it was a solid film. I thought it was very enjoyable, and I didn't expect that going into it. So that's got me a little bit more excited to delve into some of these. I mean, you mentioned earlier you're watching these in order. I unfortunately can't say the same. As I'm not gonna, I'll discuss it when we get to them. But my rewatch is all over the place. But as we're approaching the end, I think it's very fair to quickly finalize. So Christopher Nolan, we've mentioned. Obviously, haven't seen our intro video. We're not going to repeat everything, but we're doing video essentially every Monday, Thursday, and Friday across this August. If you're watching at home, look up on the screen now. You will quickly see the dates. So, of course, if you're watching, this is the following review. This is the first one. We're going to be back this Monday, the 3rd of August. That is going to be our review of Memento, which I don't think me and have ever actually discussed with each other, which I'm really looking forward to. This is what's great. Some of the earlier films we haven't even discussed between ourselves. So there's going to be a whole new dynamic. So if you do enjoy Christopher Nolan as a director, as a writer, if you enjoy his films, you're looking forward to Tenet, this is one of the places to be. We're going to quickly bring up the social medias one last time for you all. So we're on Facebook at Cinema Savvy, Twitter at Cinema_Savvy, Instagram at Cinema_Savvy, and link to TeePublic is in the description below. So that has been our review of the following. I said, if you enjoy this, drop us a like. We are getting a lot better at stuff like this, interacting with people. We're going to be commenting along. We've replied to all comments on the channel. People message on social media. We're good with that. We like chatting with you. We like to discuss these films, and comment below to let us know you're knowing the film. And actually, more importantly for this review, comment below if you've seen the following. Please do. Simple yes or no. But also, do you plan on watching it? Because like I said, yes, it's hard to get, but it's really interesting watch. I would love this to, not necessarily get a Netflix release, but I'd like a re-release of this. It's a shame not many people have seen it, because I think it's solid. And I think because it hasn't got that release, people don't assume that it's actually all right when it's absolutely fine.
Yeah, totally. I'd recommend this movie. I know we have kind of spoiled the movie, but if you haven't seen it, go and check it out if you're curious. If you are a Christopher Nolan fan and this one's missing off your list of ones that you've seen, it's fun to piece it all together. The non-linear storytelling, it's always fun to do. Very similar to a lot of his other movies, and yeah, it's a blast to watch. And at 70 minutes. It's a breeze to watch. You can get it done in a day. And probably more easily available is Doodlebug, which you can find on YouTube. Just type it in, you'll find it on there. So if you're curious about Christopher Nolan's one of his first ever short films, you can find that easily. A lot easier than the following, at least. But yeah, that'll do it for our first official entry in Christopher Nolan month. This was great to talk about, and very much looking forward to talking about all the others. We're going to round off now. So yeah, we'll see you on the Memento review. See ya.